This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Well, it's spring in North America, and with spring comes baseball, nicer weather, and allergies. And I've got some bad news for my allergy-suffering friends. I suffer from allergies. So I went into ChatGPT today, and I said, do people who suffer from allergies have higher IQs? The answer, no. I said, do people who suffer from allergies, are they more attractive? The answer, no. And are people who suffer from allergies more successful? Also, the answer, no. So then I asked, are there any benefits to having allergies? And pretty much the answer was no. It tried to make me feel good about myself, but...
You didn't get like a, you're absolutely right. Something like that. Positive affirmation.
That's what I was expecting. I mean, I've grown to expect that it would meet me halfway.
So you asked ChatGPT, come on, man, you're making this up, right? It's like you asked ChatGPT if people with allergies are higher IQ, lower IQ, more attractive, more successful.
So let's take down the fourth wall. Before we hit record, we always tell our guests, Jim's going to hit me with something. I have no idea what it is. I usually just react in the moment. So this time I decided to come up with the most outlandish thing I could think of. And there you go.
Well, okay. So yeah, definitely reacting in the moment. I don't think it's that outlandish, only because I know that people are incorporating AI, especially chatbots, into their daily life. I use it all the time. I'm sure you use it all the time. I'm sure a guest does as well. But people are turning to it for medical advice and relationship advice, all kinds of stuff. So it doesn't shock me. If my question would have been, okay, if you got a result back that said, I have allergies and therefore I am not more intelligent than someone without allergies, the next question would be, am I less intelligent than someone with allergies? Because then it would be really interesting to say, okay, where do I fall on the intelligence spectrum?
I was afraid of what it might say, so I didn't bother with any of those questions. But you made me think, like, what do you think of people having relationships with chatbots and with virtual relationship partners?
So when you say relationship and partner, define what you mean by that, because I feel like that's a slippery
like
one.
romantic relationships.
Look, if that's where someone is getting fulfillment, fine. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know yet what the healthiness of something like that would be, but if it works for somebody, cool, great.
I mean, you hear about people in unhealthy relationships all the time. So I don't see, unless the technology went bad, that could be a great movie. Okay,
it's
I'm
called
definitely
Terminator.
taking us off the rails now.
Well, it's called Terminator. Is that movie, technology going off the rails and AI coming back for us because the singularity happened and decided that I don't remember the exact story behind Terminator, but I know it wasn't good. Or The Matrix, the same thing. The Matrix is the same idea.
Yeah, technology gone wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's just keep it. Let's just keep it wrong. Let's see. Before we get to our main topics today, we've got some conferences that you and I are going to be at. We've got EIC in Berlin coming up. We're going to see our guests there. We have discount codes for that conference. It's on our website, idacpodcast.com, but we have a 25% off, IDAC25MKO. If you use that, you get 25% off. And then we're going to see our guest as well at Identiverse in June in Las Vegas. So looking forward to that. We are going to be doing a game show to kick off the opening of the expo hall. Tentatively is what we have planned right now. I think it's Monday night, so people can come out. We will be doing the game show, probably majority rules, which we've done a couple times now, a couple of recent conferences that you and I met at. It's a game where everybody can play on your phone. I'm hopeful to recruit maybe some sponsors to help dole out some prizes and things like that and make it exciting to kind of kick off the expo hall. But we've got a discount for that one as well. It's 30%. They've extended that one out to us till very much right at the end. So I don't know if there's a better discount code. I hope not, but IDV26-IDAC30% gets you 30% off. Again, it's on in our show notes here, as well as on our website. People can check that out, but we hope to see people there and come out and support us. And then we'll have a booth pre-recording live podcasts. And I think you've been working on maybe scheduling like who we're going to talk to at both conferences, right, Jim?
Yeah, trying to schedule who we're going to talk to and also evening events. So I think we're going to partner with somebody to have an evening event. So we'd love to get people out to that. As far as that 30% discount code, is there like an end date for that?
I think it goes right up to the last minute.
Right up to the last minute. Okay.
Mhm.
Then it definitely, as far as I know, is the best discount code. And we always insist on having the best code available for the show. I mean, that's, you can rely on our discount codes, like they're not being upended by another discount code that you find out there.
Yeah, that's always embarrassing when you're promoting a discount code and it's like, oh, someone else has a better one. Oh,
Especially
okay.
when you're saying it's the best and then you find a better one.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Shirley at CRA. She's awesome to work with, and she definitely takes care of us. And by extension, takes care of everyone else who uses those codes as well. So shout out to Shirley. Let's get into our conversation today because we're going to get an update on IDPro. We're going to talk maybe a little bit of ethics and identity, but let me welcome, shockingly, for the first time, Elizabeth Garber. She's the executive director at IDPro, and she also does marketing at OpenID Foundation. So welcome to the show officially for the first time, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
I feel like you and I have stood in the same circles at conferences, but we didn't really chat too much until Gartner, I think it was, was that December?
It's just
And then I happened to walk into the little restaurant there to get something to eat after the conference ended. And you were sitting at like a table next to me, and we just started chatting, and that was great. But I'm glad to have you on the show. So it's tradition. Anybody who comes on a show for the first time kind of has to share their origin story. Well, they don't have to, but we would prefer you did. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the space of identity and security and all things IDPro.
Absolutely. So I usually tell this story in 3 parts. I spent the first bulk of my career, more than 10 years, doing digital transformation projects at big companies. I worked primarily in the UK. I was in the UK for over 14 years. And I worked in telecommunications. I worked in broadband. I worked in geospatial data, financial services. I ran the gamut of big companies and big industries in tech. Oh, I didn't even say utilities. I did energy for a while. That was fun too. So when I got to the US, that was back in 2018, I took a job. Did my second stint in financial services, and I was immediately dropped into the deep end of the tail end of an IAM project that had gone tremendously wrong for our call center. So I ended up really having to drive root cause analysis across the organization to figure out what had gone wrong, and found that this industry is incredibly far-reaching, incredibly complex, and really enjoyed how far the rabbit hole went. I pretty soon found myself working across a group of banks that were trying to create digital identity solutions as an industry. So I was working with the Institute of International Finance, and that led me to the digital identity community of people, largely out of the OpenID Foundation, but also other communities were represented. I found my way into editing a white paper called Gain Digital Trust, and this was trying to pull together the thoughts of what ended up being over 155 people, experts, big names. I'm sure you've interviewed many of them, about how we create interoperable, high trust identity systems. And I don't know, the process of reading, writing, editing that paper with those amazing people, it led me to do a bunch of my own research into the field, and I was just absolutely addicted by the time I was done. That led to part 2 of my career, which was a digital identity startup, primarily focused on banks and open finance. That was a wild ride lasting a few years. I worked with some amazing venture capitalists. I did some amazing accelerator programs, met some fantastic people, and learned a ton. But what I also learned was that my favorite part of working in the industry is actually working in the nonprofit space, working with people who are developing standards to ensure that the internet is secure, privacy protecting, that we have interoperability across the systems. I love working in the policy space, and I love working to build capabilities across this industry. I think that that's really where my passion lies, rather than in the side of like trying to make lots of money for myself. I really, really enjoy the community and working with these nonprofits. So that brings me to part 3, which is right now I do work exclusively with nonprofits in the industry. You've already mentioned the OpenID Foundation. I work also with a number of nonprofits on the policy side, sort of taking the work that what was OIX, the Open Identity Exchange, their work on trust frameworks. I'm kind of pursuing that work now, working with an organization called City Hub to try to establish how at the policy layer we can create digital identity interoperability across mostly government ID systems. That work brings me to places like ID for Africa and work with NGOs and things like that. Recently finished up some work with the United Nations Digital Public Infrastructure Safeguarding Project. That was a lot of fun. And then the third leg of that is I love working with the professional community, building capability in this field. That leads me to work with the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation, who I know you support. And that's sometimes where we've been standing in the same circles as you've interviewed many of our winners of the Kim Cameron and Vittorio Bertocci Award. And then obviously IDPro, where I'm now the executive director. Very, very happy to be working with that organization and creating a talent pipeline throughout this industry so that it can sustain itself into the future.
That's a lot of hats. And,
Yeah.
for people who aren't aware, right, this podcast is the official podcast for IDPro, and we're very happy to support it. Jim and I have been members for years. I think I served on a couple of committees. I think I still do one on the the NomCom is what we call it. So nominations for being on the board.
And those nominations will be opening up very soon.
Yes. So, PSA for people who are interested in, contributing back to IDPro or becoming part of the community, at a greater extent, like Elizabeth has, there will be, I'm not sure how many seats are open, but extend, your interest out to people. And, let's see if we can get some good folks to fill some board seats for us. Look, you've done a lot, right, when it comes to sort of all this stuff you've worked on. You've been in the room when these policies are being written or they're being exchanged or these standards and things like that. I mean, how do you even get started in something like that? Is it just being willing to be in the room and kind of show up and listen? Is it volunteer? If I'm with someone out there, it's like, wow, Elizabeth, that sounds awesome. I want to be Elizabeth when I grow up. How do I put my foot forward and get my hat into the ring to take part in some of those activities?
Yeah. So my approach has always been, if I see a development like a space that I want to develop into, I don't assume that I can walk into a job there. I volunteer to do something to help that community with something that I can help with. So in the case of the GAIN paper that I led the editorial committee of that paper. So I turned the brilliant thoughts of 155 people into something coherent and in English, because there were many languages as well involved. So I volunteered to do that. That was a very large volunteer endeavor, and it led me to build relationships, and it led me to build knowledge. And I volunteered a couple of other times after that and started giving back to the community in whatever ways that I could. And that eventually led to very small paid work, and that eventually led to being able to do it as my full-time job. But I am still volunteering on the side. The UN work that I mentioned, that was a strictly volunteer endeavor. It was part of an advisory board, and we, I was the rapporteur for that as well. I tend to volunteer for writing gigs. It seems like that's where I add value to the tech community, and that's that's very much my approach, and it has been throughout my career.
So the UN has some kind of cachet to it. It's like, oh, you work with the UN. How did you get involved with the UN specifically? Is it somebody you knew? Was it
No.
a posting somewhere? It's like, hey, we need this help. How did that work?
So the digital public infrastructure, it's called the Universal Framework for Digital Public Infrastructure. Sorry, no. It's called the Universal framework for safeguarding digital public infrastructure. Lots of words. Maybe you can edit that out.
It is government, so we forgive it. That's how it works.
So many words. But it is all about safeguarding DPI, which is a term that's maybe not bandied about quite so much with your podcast listeners, depending on who your audiences are, but it is very much a term that is growing in the identity community in the development space, in the developing world with government ID systems. So that followed, I got involved in that after I had built relationships with organizations who had been involved in City Hub. That's the interoperability work that I was mentioning earlier. Like we had the World Bank in the room for many of those sessions, many government, like the ministers of digital identity in different governments around the world. And I really care. This is what I care about. I wrote in 2023 a paper called Human-Centric Digital Identity for Governments, which analyzed the different architectural patterns out there, the different risks and trade-offs of different types of identity systems, and like how to begin the thought process of which architectural pattern you're going to implement in your own country. So this is sort of a development area that I wanted to opt into and work towards and manifest for myself. And so when I saw that they were looking for new members of the cohort that was designing these safeguards and helping to operationalize what was a very, it starts off at the principles level, and then it's like, how do you define tools that help you make those principles work in practice? That's what that community of people was doing. So I just applied. I sent in my resume. I sent in some essays critiquing the framework as it existed today. And thankfully they selected me, and I was a member of the cohort and invited to be the writer on the cohort.
That's brave. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, that's a very cool way to approach it.
Thank you.
So, I think that the moral of the story there is like, reach out, apply,
Yeah.
Meet people.
Yeah, that's certainly the second time in my career that I've seen an opportunity and just said, to hell with it. I'm going to write the essay and see if I win, and I do. So like,
I like how you
it.
self-censored there for a second. I was thinking of a different word, but
yeah,
I think
wasn't
we're both on the
sure
same page.
what age restriction category you want this podcast to be in. So
we'll keep it
guide
PG-13 just for now, I guess.
So that's like one swear word allowed. Okay.
So trivia is we've had one swear word that I can remember in our 418th episode that we've done. And it's been years since that person, or since we've had that. And it's totally fine. Like, I don't care, people use language, whatever it is, but I do think it's kind of a little trivia thing for someone out there. I want to ask you about IDPro because you're the executive director for it. Give us the commercial. If somebody is listening to this podcast and you're not a member of IDPro, what the heck are you doing? Get out there, become part of the community. But that's just me. Let's hear it directly from you, Elizabeth. Why should people join IDPro? What is it?
Well, everybody out there, businesses, individuals, institutions, governments, everybody is dependent on identity systems to solve some of the most critical problems out there. How you empower people to thrive in an increasingly online and digital economy, how you recognize who's authentic, which devices are authentic, which agents are authentic, and give them appropriate access. How do you protect against rising rates of fraud, theft, cybercrime? These are big problems, and this area is moving incredibly quickly. IDPro is offering a global professional community to ensure that those professionals working in this space and solving those problems are recognized for the great work that they're doing, that they're connected to one another and can form relationships, collaborations, mentorships, and that they're well equipped to advance, safe digital services in their organizations. And we do that in a few key ways. For the people themselves, we're fostering a multidisciplinary community that serves people at all levels, whether they're entry level, whether they've been in this space for a long time, or whether or somewhere in between. We're serving the businesses who are our sponsors and who frankly just benefit from the work that we do. We serve them by helping to cultivate a pipeline of talented, equipped, well-connected people. And we offer continuing education resources, and we're constantly reflecting on what's new, what's happening in the world of non-human or agentic identity, for example. What do people need to know now? And we publish that as our body of knowledge. And obviously that feeds into our CIDPRO, the certification program that we offer.
A long time ago, I was part of the CIDPRO committee to create questions. I don't know if it's still on there, but I got one question on to the test, and so I felt like that was good enough.
What question was it?
I don't remember. It was like the first version, like 5 years ago or whatever it was. But I was so happy to get like one on the test. Like, all right, like I did it. And that's something, again, I had never done anything like that before. And so I was like, sure, I'll throw my hat in the ring and try to help out here where I can. I learned a lot through the process. But there's a lot going on. The CIDPRO, CIDPRO certification I'm seeing get more traction. And so people can check that out. The community is definitely, I think, one of the strongest parts of IDPro. And that is typically, for me at least, reflected in the Slack community that's been built up. I know we just went through like a Slack migration. So maybe this is a little bit of a public service announcement for people who are still on the old Slack to get moved over to the new Slack. But can you talk a little bit about like what the Slack means, for the community at large?
I mean, there are so many questions that people put there, whatever someone is grappling with. I mean, the ones, and you see the community jump to their aid, right? So, it could be quiet for a few days, but if somebody comes in and says, help, my organization needs me to write a multi-year roadmap helping us to achieve IAM maturity. Where do I begin? What do I do? Or here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? That was a topic that recently came up, by the way, on our Slack instance, and it's led to a whole separate channel where we're discussing this and trying to create materials that will help organizations with that exact problem. But when a question is thrown out there, you get some of the industry's leading voices, the people who are on stage at Identiverse talking about these subjects, the people who have written books on how to implement OAuth 2 or IGA or whatever. These people are interacting with you, giving you the benefit of their years of experience and thought leadership. And you see that happening every day. I don't know if have you ever asked a question that helped you in your day job on the IDPro Slack? Yeah,
I have. Not everybody knows everything. And no matter how long you've been in this game, there is always some part that you can, get smarter, educate on. And yeah, I've used it. I mostly lurk and either answer questions or just kind of see like where people are at from like a headspace. But I've asked questions, and I won't say I'm shocked. I was thrilled that within like the span of like 4 hours, there was like a bunch of really good answers. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a situation where I was like waiting days, weeks to get an answer from something.
I've had the same situation. I mean, the same experience. I think that's a common thread, is that it's the community, and it manifests itself virtually anyway through the Slack channel.
Yeah.
And you get to know people through the Slack, and then you get to know them in person at conferences, if you're able to attend them. So, it's a good lead in for, I guess, taking a virtual relationship and have it be somewhat more comfortable when you finally meet someone in the real world, if you decide to do that.
We're trying it. One of the things I was talking to one of our sponsors about last week was how do we help people meet each other locally? Like there's the IdentiBeer meetups that happen. There's definitely a strong one in Seattle. There's some strong ones in Germany. But how do we help people find one another and create more of those local meetups? We just kicked one off in New York. I say IdentiBeer is an independent but closely associated initiative, let's say. And I definitely want the IDPro channel or workspace to be one where we help people meet each other, not just at conferences, but locally too. And I'll probably be kicking off some virtual meetups, trialing that out in the coming weeks.
I'm glad you brought up the IdentiBeer. I think it's a great way for people to meet in person, and it's not an alcohol-fueled event, right?
Oh.
So it's not like people getting drunk. If you don't drink, you'll be perfectly comfortable. And the people who do drink usually have like one beer.
Yeah, they
Or
just
maybe
sit and
two, right?
talk identity, in a comfortable social setting where, yeah, no need for a sponsor to cater a meal or anything like that. It's just get together in a friendly space and talk to people who do the same things you do, or a slightly different variant on what happens in this industry. Can meet some really cool people there.
Yeah, you get all those perspectives, and
Mhm.
it's fun. I'm one of those people who doesn't really drink, and so I think some people might get turned off by the name IdentiBeer because they just assume. But I can assure you that there are people there who also do not drink and still partake and have a good time and meet folks and stuff like that.
Definitely.
So I think we'll have one in Berlin while we're out there. There's probably one for Identiverse that's coming up. So I would definitely, if you haven't checked it out, the website is identi.beer. And Espen Bago usually does a pretty good job of like keeping that updated with like all the goings ons and stuff like that. But this idea of local meetups, local people kind of getting together, I think is great. I live in a relatively small market, Asheville, North Carolina, up in the mountains. I'm sure there's some identity people here, and I just haven't gone to the effort of like trying to like create something here. But there is
The
definitely
guy I
strength in
was
numbers.
talking to about this is in North Carolina. I don't know how close he is to Asheville, North Carolina, but I feel like you guys.
That's all right. I'll travel.
I'm gonna find a way to connect the North Carolinians.
There you go. It would be like the IdentiBeer Carolina, somewhere in like
Yeah,
Charlotte or something like that.
yeah.
I know Charlotte has a good concentration of folks. I want to ask you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw a softball down the middle for you.
Oh, good.
Because you've got some news potentially to announce. We don't have everything figured out quite yet, but let me just say this. My understanding is that the IDPro board has voted on something and approved something. Can you share what that is?
I can. The IDPro board has approved a discount code for Identity at the Center listeners on their first time membership to IDPro. I need to figure out a way to operationalize this because we don't do this. We only do this for Identity at the Center listeners. So I hope that in the next couple of days, I will be able to share with you the process, and that you'll be able to share it in the show notes or as an addendum. But we will be offering a discount code for your listeners here.
That is super cool.
The
it's
best
definitely something
discount
that
code.
is the best, the only discount code, or whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah.
That is super cool. So, fewer reasons why people should not be part of IdentiPro or IDPro. The announcement, Elizabeth, you and I were like talking like, all right, well, do we have the information? Are we going to be able to shoot it? It's like, all right, here's how kind of we'll do it. So if we have a audio visual component, it's going to go here. It's AI Jeff jumping in here for just a moment. We mentioned in this episode that Identity at the Center is the official podcast of IDPro, but we didn't have all the discount details locked down at the time of recording, so I wanted to make sure you had them. If you're not yet an IDPro member, new members can get $25 off their first year of membership. Just head to idpro.org/IDAC to sign up and claim that offer. IDPro is doing incredible work to professionalize and elevate the identity community, and we're proud to be part of that mission. Again, the link for this offer is at idpro.org/IDAC, or you can click the IDPro banner on our website at idacpodcast.com. Now, back to the conversation. That's super exciting. The clock is ticking. This show goes live in a couple weeks, so theoretically, things should be ready by the time people listen to this. But as I think people in IAM know, operationalizing something is usually the most difficult part of taking the idea, architecting it, and building it. And it's like, oh, what do you mean? Okay, now we have to actually support it and get it in place. So we'll ask for some grace if it's not quite ready yet, but we think we're in a good spot.
Yes. I'll get it operational.
Jim, you've been chomping at the bit here. I'll hand it over to you. I know that you've got some questions you probably want to ask.
I'm still actually just sitting in awe because I'm so happy about this. Actually, I know we do have some form of show notes, and I saw insert discount code here. Like, that's so cool. Elizabeth, thank you from the bottom of my heart for, first for making Identity at the Center the IDPro official podcast, or continuing that. I got to give a shout out to Heather for kind of being the initiator of that, but also just the support of this form of media, because we think we kind of contribute to the community as well. Jeff, you raised the name Espen Bago. I remember the first body of knowledge article that I read on IDPro's website. And by the way, that was a long time ago. I I love the body knowledge. I love the Slack channel, but kind of I always go back to the body of knowledge because that's available to everyone. You don't even need to be a member. So even if you're not a member, go out to IDPro's website, check out the body of knowledge. There's just a ton of, intro or overview of what are all these things that you're hearing about in an identity. So if your company won't support you joining, or you don't have the money for it, go out to IDPro's website. This body of knowledge is a great resource. Elizabeth, I wanted to know, I know you've contributed to the body of knowledge. What is kind of an article that you would want to kind of mention, or maybe has come up a bunch of times in your conversations?
Well, I have to give you a slight correction there. I mean, I've edited articles in the body of knowledge, but I am not a named author in the body of knowledge itself just yet. I've written other papers for other organizations. And the one that I called out earlier was about human-centric digital identity. And I think there are two body of knowledge articles that relate really closely to my body of work. And those are the two that we have on ethics in identity systems. They're written, both of them are in the I think I want to say 2020, like a 2023 issue of the body of knowledge, one by Mike Kaiser, about ethics in digital identity and identity-driven algorithms, I believe is close to the title of that one. And then one by Hank Marsman on a sort of a broader view of ethics as it relates to digital identity. I should also say I love all of our contributors and all of our articles in the body of knowledge, but those two are probably the ones that I personally cite most in the work that I do with the human-centric identity or the UN DPI framework or things like that. So those are the ones I would shout out to.
Okay, shout out to them. Give me an idea, what is in a body of knowledge article about ethics and identity security?
It's just identity systems, not just limited to the topic of security. But so let's take a step back and talk about ethics in general. Hank does a good job of exploring the different approaches to ethics in practice. He lays out some of the philosophical underpinnings, whereas Mike does and then so Hank also explores some of the varied approaches that you might take to ground that and use it actually organizationally. And then Mike puts forward a framework for thinking about things in your own organization. But I would also probably recommend just taking a step back and talking about what does ethics even mean in general, not just in the context of identity, but what does it mean? And it's not super black and white. There's no one definition of what is ethical and what isn't. But what I usually call back to when talking about this subject is that technology itself is always expressing a set of values, right? Whether that is an intentional set of values or an unintentional set of values. What happens as a result of technology is that there are values being expressed. And ethics is really the practice of identifying what values you intend this technology to express, what risks of harm are inherent in the system, and then balancing and mitigating those trade-offs. Is that too ethereal?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think a lot of times it's easy to, at first glance, think ethics is easy, right? It's stealing is bad.
True. Usually.
But then you think, okay, well, what if your family is starving and you stole a loaf of bread? Is it bad still?
Mm-hmm.
And are those types of issues? I mean, I know that's still kind of more black and white, right? But there's got to be some conundrums in the identity space as well.
There are always conundrums. If anybody thinks ethics is easy, there are some great simple tools that you can use to really challenge yourself on how consistent you are morally and ethically. The trolley problem is. Are you familiar with the trolley problem? Either of you? One of you's nodding. One of you's not. Well,
Yeah, the train tracks and choosing, right? Do you save one life or a bunch of lives?
yeah. Do you save one life but intervene to save that one, or do you intervene to save a bunch of lives but losing one person in the process?
It's the classic superhero dilemma, right? Every single superhero movie has the same thing.
Exactly.
It's like the special interest person, right? Whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, father, parent, whatever it is,
Yeah.
or do you save all the people in the bus, right?
Exactly. And this problem has a lot of different corollaries, right? People have been coming up with, okay, well, if you would do that, then what's the next step? Now you're pushing a man onto the track. Now you're there's all sorts of next steps, and I don't remember them all off by heart, but I strongly recommend going and like testing your moral and ethical consistency, and just we can probably provide a link in the show notes. And Hank, I think, references the trolley problem and that in his paper. But no, it's not easy. I remember Nishant Kaushik once told a story on a panel that we did of walking around a vendor floor and seeing a sign that said 100% ethically compliant, which is kind of ridiculous, right? Because what does that mean? Compliant or conformant to what? To whose set of values?
Farm to table access reviews. That's what I think of.
I mean, it completely depends which set of values you've identified. Like, it could be that this is a tool for conducting surveillance, and that is security is valuable in some sense. So it's compliant with a set of values, but which value? Because there's no one who's giving you a list of ethics and saying, here's how you comply. It's a process. It is not a single answer.
It seems to me that sometimes big tech gets in trouble, especially around privacy. So it's like, okay, yeah, private data, and then law enforcement asks them to turn over private data.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the company may have an ethical concern with doing that. And I think if they don't have a framework for how they're going to deal with those kind of things and apply it consistently, I mean, this is, I'm kind of spitballing here, but it seems like these are the areas where ethics becomes a real life dilemma. And I wonder, do companies kind of think those things through, or do they just make sure that they have the right advisement at the right time of experts like yourself who really think about these kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example of where privacy comes into tension with safety, or counter fraud, and that happens again and again. I was just you listeners may have watched an episode of The Daily Show with Jon Stewart recently, where Cindy Cohn, the executive director of the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, was on, and they had a debate between the two of them about should tech platforms like Meta, who was recently held liable for harms to children, should they be held liable for that? Or is that a form of censorship? And they had a debate between themselves, and they were both prioritizing different sets of values. And I think that that's a classic example of where there are two sets of goods that we could be chasing and two sets of harms that we could be chasing. And we have to understand what the trade-off is and go through the process of understanding where do we need to regulate this so that at a societal level we're minimizing harm? Where do we need to allow companies to be making these ethical choices themselves and weighing it up? And then once we're all doing it and making those ethical decisions ourselves, what are the frameworks that we're using and the tools that we're crafting to enable practitioners to actually have those thought processes as they're building product? It's not easy.
Me personally, sometimes I get into thinking about these issues, and I'm like, well, glad I don't have to decide on that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to head out to dinner now and think about something else. But for the people out there who are like, oh my gosh, this is me right here. Where do they start? I mean, is it these body of knowledge articles can really kick things off for them?
I would love to see more conversation about those articles in the IDPro Slack. So, like I said, Hank listed some tools that are really useful. I think they both did, actually. So there's a thing called the ethical canvas. There's an approach that he describes and links to in the paper called guidance ethics, the guidance ethics approach. And then Mike, as I mentioned, he proposed a whole framework in there that really articulated, I think, 4 or 5 values like human well-being, accountability, transparency. I think privacy was in there. Like he created a list and recommended a framework for managing ethics in an organization and specific to digital identity technology. I don't know if that is going to be like the be-all and end-all framework, but it's certainly the beginning of a conversation. And I'd love to see identity practitioners talking more about this in our community and elsewhere, because, you know, identity, when I think about it in my work, like at the UN and in other places, identity it's sitting at the heart of how people's rights are manifested, right? How do you ensure that you get an education? It does start with a foundational ID document. How do you get access to healthcare? There's going to be an identity check somewhere. All of those rights in the either whether you want to think about the Bill of Rights or whether you want to think about the about international law, many of them depend upon having access to an identity and an identity system that has been provisioned and permissioned and you can authenticate. It's so important to these fundamental aspects to our society.
Identity is at the center.
Identity is totally at the center. Very prescient, you guys.
I'm going to have links in our show notes for these articles that you're mentioning, and you can find them on idpro.org in the body of knowledge section, but I'll have direct links to those. I want to ask you around some of these trade-offs maybe that people have to make, because you talk about having more conversation around ethics, and it can be a difficult conversation because there is political ramifications, there's geo ramifications, there's personal ramifications when we start talking about this, right? Everybody has a different moral compass in how they approach ethics. A business's moral compass is probably not the same and may evolve or adapt or change over time anyway. So having productive, fruitful, respectful conversations for ethics can be difficult.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've got any tips on like how to like start that conversation.
I think so. I am never one to say that you can have a completely neutral or unbiased take on things, but I think by being transparent and at least bringing that stuff to the surface in as unemotional a way as one can, even though humans are made out of like we're chemical beings, right? Like emotions happen. So you can never be completely emotionless in these conversations. It's impossible. But yeah, surfacing this stuff in as neutral a way as possible is ideal. And that means you do need to have a kind of a process, a framework, a toolkit for doing so. I think the ethics canvas is a good place to start, or Mike's framework. But it means like exploring your product or the end-to-end journey of using it in the context of a few key questions, like who is at risk of exclusion in this product? If it is fully dependent on a device or the ability to this is an example that comes out of Hank's paper, actually, the ability to use a swipe function on a phone, or if you're using a biometrics tool that, has been trained on a certain demographic, like who is at risk of exclusion here? We've seen that those tools unintentionally have, excluded folks with a darker complexion at times. And that's a story that I heard even in I was at MOSIP Connect in January, and the Director General of the identity system in Uganda told a story of how they implemented an ID system, and it just hadn't been tested on their own community, and people with darker complexions, like the Director General herself, were unable to get through the biometric checks simply because the tuning was off and they had to continue to do more checks. So if they hadn't been through that process, they wouldn't have uncovered that they were going to be excluding a very large percentage of their population. So highlighting the risks methodically and in ways that are not necessarily value judgments, but that clearly articulate the values that might be in tension, and then having those conversations is critically important.
So there's trade-offs that have to be made here, right? Nothing is going to be like 100% in every direction. So how do you navigate those types of trade-offs? And I wanted to make one comment too before you answer that question, is because one of the things that I think can be really powerful in a conversation is being able to change your viewpoint. If you come in with an idea, a thought, a notion, whatever it may be, it's okay to change your mind about something. I do it all the time. If there's new facts, new information, change my mind. That's fine, right? But present it in a way that it is structured and not an attack. Just for me personally, that works best. But
yeah,
I think if more people were open to changing their minds and not being on a burning bridge and having to feel like they have to hang on to it for dear life, that also goes a long way from a discussion standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting really deep into like the soft skills territories here. But a long time ago, like I used to write about inclusivity and the value of inclusivity. And for me, inclusivity inside an organization and inclusivity as a value is super important, especially in connection to like the value also of critical thinking. So inclusivity, to make sure that you have a diverse range of perspectives, a diverse range of thought, and coupled with the value of critical thinking and being able to have tough conversations where different perspectives, different beliefs are navigated, like not just creating conflict for conflict's sake, but surfacing productive conflict and being able to manage through that. That is where organizations are going to be achieving the strongest results. Because the worst decisions are the ones where everybody just kind of agrees. Like you don't want groupthink. That's where terrible things can happen. That's where terrible things can happen if no one is challenging the status quo or challenging the leader. So we're very much in the territory of soft skills here, but these conversations really do depend on having inclusivity of thought, inclusivity of perspective, diverse perspectives, and a willingness to navigate critical conflict and welcome it.
Yeah,
maybe I need to. Do I need to re-say that?
No,
Okay.
Definitely not. One thing I was going to say is like, I really love what Jeff said about you've got to go into things with an open mind, because you think about it, if two people are having a debate about something, it's table stakes, right? We have an equal chance of convincing the other party that they should think like we think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't expect that from somebody unless they're willing to also say, hey, if you make a better case, you're going to change my mind. Now, I think sometimes there could be the imbalance of, okay, you are a lawyer and we're talking about the way things should be, and you're really good at making arguments and stuff, and I'm not as good. So, but put that aside. I think Jeff's point was great. As far as this topic of ethics, going back to it, what I've been sitting here thinking about is, I think the classic debate, and I think it applies to identity, because I really feel like the battleground is between privacy and the right to privacy and the right to safety, right? Where does the value belong? Is it my right to privacy, or is it your right to safety? Now, should I be able to get onto an airplane without being checked? I think we've all, as a society, accepted the fact that we're going to allow ourselves to be scanned. We're going to show a government ID. And that's because we value the safety of getting on an airplane and, that you're not carrying a weapon or a bomb or something like that. But then there are other areas where it's like, okay, well, should private companies be able to just inspect our phone logs? Because maybe they provide some privacy service where they're going to say, hey, we're going to identify people who are potentially calling their drug dealer, and then we're going to turn that over to the police. So that's the value that we provide. And I think as a society, we've said, like, no, we don't want those kind of things to happen. Right. And whether you think we should or not, I think that, there's probably a large percentage of people who say that's where privacy wins, right? We don't want private companies going through phone logs and doing those kind of like analytics and figuring out what they think they can figure out.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think there's definitely, there's often a tension between privacy and safety and public safety, or safety against like identity theft, fraud, children's safety is what I mentioned earlier. There's often a tension there, but two things. Number one, you're right to say it's probably context dependent in a lot of cases, and we should figure out which spaces require regulation or legislation to at least help. And then the second point is, like, aren't we close to having that be a false choice? Don't we have technologies in a lot of contexts where we could actually keep children safe and also keep our privacy intact? Things like zero knowledge proofs, passkeys, selective disclosure. In some contexts, I think that this could be a false choice. And if we're writing regulation and legislation correctly, maybe we are not taking privacy away in service to child protection, for example. There are probably ways of threading the needle such that it's not such a binary. Although not in all cases.
I think there are certain touch points when you're talking about something like child safety. It's like, oh, child safety wins. I don't want to hear anything else. And so I think that is a lot of times where it comes back to. But I mean, I was thinking of a scenario where it's like, well, hey, should you have the right to know where, former felons or former, like, even like go beyond felony, like former murderers and other people live in your neighborhood? Like, oh, if they're going to have a hard time living anywhere, then.
That's true. And
Right.
we have systems like that today, right? But should we? These are all really valuable conversations. One of the panels I sat on at Identity Week USA years ago, was about ethics, and it was very strange because I had just come from IIW, and those have very different communities and very different perspectives on display. But one of the things that was said on this panel was that each police force could be making its own decisions about ethics in the context of biometric technology and its use in policing. I'm not so sure that I'm cool with every police force having a completely different framework defined at that local level, right? Like, do we not want to create state level or national level ethical frameworks for how we use some of the most powerful technologies for identifying and tracking people?
Yeah, I don't want to get too political with it, but what I think you're hitting on is, it is the question. It is, do we have a consistent approach to something?
Yeah.
And when we have variations is when we typically run into the most problems, because if it's not consistently enforced, then it becomes, well, why can Jim do that and Jeff can't? Because the rules weren't consistently enforced, or we didn't even agree on what the rules were before, or whatever the ethics and the moral decisions that we're making on it. And I think this extends into the identity world, right? Most of the things that we've been talking about are not technology problems.
Right.
They are people and process things, which highlights just how encompassing identity is. It is not just technology. We absolutely have the things that we can do to say, hey, I need to get into this bar, but in the US, I need to demonstrate that I'm 21 years old. The way we have all done it for all time, as far as I'm aware of, is we show them our full driver's license or some other ID that has not only our birth date on it, which now the person checking it has to do math to say, okay, is this person 21 or older? But it also has a whole bunch of other pieces of information that the person does not need to know. And so that's just, we've accepted it as a society, at least in the US, this is how we're going to do it. It's not a technology problem. There are absolutely ways to do it, but it becomes a problem when this thing costs more money to do it in a way that's more secure. So now we're making trade-offs between budget and risk and privacy. And these are real ethical decisions and discussions that need to take place for identity systems. I think people think ethics and they think probably like, big moral decisions of like, which train track do I put the train onto, right?
Do you push the fat man? That's one of the levels. Do you?
It'll slow the train theoretically. The physicist and scientist in me, which I am neither of those, will tell me, well, that'll slow the train down faster and prevent less carnage, down the road.
Yeah.
Morbid, but I don't know why I went there. But there are so many different ways to answer these questions. And that's why I think having the discussion, it will be uncomfortable. It is by design going to be an uncomfortable discussion, but we have to be able to have these discussions and come at it from an approach to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's my viewpoint. Here's what you're thinking. Here's your viewpoint. Let's try to figure this out together. And sometimes, one person or one group might storm off in one direction. Okay, let's come back and let's have a conversation, right? And these are not easy things.
No.
But that is the nature of some of these decisions that are being made in the real world. Yeah, how do we look? It's happening all over the world, right? For be able to either vote or to do a certain activity or whatever it may be, right? I think everyone was probably familiar with COVID several years ago, showing your vaccine status. Like, okay, like what is going on here? And there wasn't a consistency around it. We saw that play out in real time. Again, I don't want to make it super political, but I think this is another area where people have to be willing to have the conversation, obviously be respectful, but also be open to changing your mind. You can be wrong, and that is okay.
Yeah.
It is okay to get smarter. It is okay to change viewpoints, especially when you're faced with facts and things that we try to agree on as a society. 2 + 2 is 4. Somebody out there listening is like, no, it's not, Jeff. You're crazy. It's like, okay,
22.
Tell me why I'm wrong. Yeah. So I guess I don't want to get too much of my soapbox, and I know we're probably going to run a little bit longer today, but I think this is such a fascinating and interesting topic that people, for whatever reason, tend to shy away from.
Yeah.
They're not willing to have that conversation. And here we are doing it in front of millions of people around the world on the, world famous Identity Center podcast. Look, we're just 3 people having a conversation. I won't say I'm an expert in anything. All I'm willing to do is share my viewpoint on it, change my mind, present me with information. And I'm happy to take that into account and create a new equation and come up with potentially a different, viewpoint on it. So I just wish more people would approach it from that perspective.
Me too.
All right. I guess I win. So there you go. Jim, what do you think?
I think you're right on, man. And, I did want to just point something out because I'm sitting here having a moment. I'm like, we go into preparation for episodes, and I thought this would be the case with Elizabeth because she's a deep thinker. We come up with what do we have? 6 questions. Well, I think we got to question 3, and then we just dove into this topic, and we're pretty much out of time. I mean, we're almost at an hour. But they're the best episodes because we just dive in, we let it go. So we have the next 3 questions. Next time you come on, Elizabeth, we've already got the first 3 questions written.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take one of those now because I do want to have Elizabeth talk real quickly about, we're going to see you at EIC. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. You're going to give a talk there. You're also going to give a talk at IdentiVerse. We'll see you there as well. And hopefully be standing in the same circles again.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about EIC and IdentiVerse and kind of how you're approaching both of those and maybe give just a high level teaser of what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah. So at EIC, I have a keynote that I'm looking forward to. It's going to be exploring some of these themes and in the context of some of the geopolitical changes that we have. It's called Identity for a Changing United States. My talk at Identiverse is also on a similar subject. It's called Lies, Damn Lies, and Privacy. And it's going to be looking at similar topics, but particularly in the context of privacy and the tensions therein, and ways in which we give up our privacy and ways in which we could be protecting it or rethinking what it means.
Tension and privacy? No way.
Not at all.
That would never happen. Well, like Jim said, we're kind of at an hour already, but I still want to end on a lighter note because we got kind of heavy here for a little bit, and I think that's fine, right? We need to have those conversations. But you and I were talking as we were getting kind of prepped up for the show and for the many questions we never got to, we just kind of dove into things. You had talked about, well, I kind of said like you do a lot of things for fun, right? And I said kind of like your hobby is collecting hobbies.
Yeah.
But the one that I honed in on was improv comedy. And then you also told me you had like an improv tragedy story. And you're like, I have to ask you, like, what does improv tragedy story mean? And tell me what this is about.
So I have this co-founder colleague. He is a tech bro / VC type. And I can't imagine he had ever done stand-up comedy or improv. And I don't think he certainly never claimed to. We were in New York City, which is a place where you can always reliably find fantastic comedy. And he was going through some stuff. Like he had some bad stuff going on in his life. And I thought, I'm going to bring him to comedy. I'm going to be a good friend to him. I'm going to bring him out to the comedy show. So I found one, and it was called something like Deep Dark Moments or something. And my assumption as an improviser was that there was going to be a typical structure would be someone coming up, telling a story, and then 5 or 6 people coming and reenacting it and turning it into a delightful, joyful, hilarious comedy show. But what we actually encountered as we sat down, him, depressed, tech bro, what we encountered was a chair, dark lights, and people coming up one by one to just tell really sad stories. Really sad stories about death, lost love.
And that was the improv show. It was just people coming up and
people
sharing their woe.
From the audience coming up and saying, I'm sad. Here's why I'm sad.
So did your friend get up there or just kind of like, oh my gosh?
He did not. He turned to me at the end and said, I said, I'm so sorry. And he said, thankfully, Elizabeth, you'll find I have a deep appreciation for the arts.
Well, there's Misery Loves Company. Maybe there's some of that could have gone wrong there.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you hear other people's like horrible stories and you're like, okay, I guess I don't have it that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the optimistic way to look at it.
Yeah.
Which is a strange position, Jim, for you to be in. Like usually you're the pessimist one on the show.
I know, but what can I
say?
say?
You can change.
No, well, I have, since we're talking about hobbies, I was going to complain.
Okay.
Hobbies are so damn expensive. And I think it's because when you work like we all work, and probably most of our listeners work, you have like this much time to enjoy your hobby. So it's like, oh, I have to have the best wine, or I'm going to go golfing. I have to have the best clubs. So everything becomes more expensive. If you're retired, you go around to the thrift store and try to find a bargain set of clubs, and you get a tea time when it's the least expensive. But probably my biggest hobby right now is traveling. And I will tell you,
about
when
expensive.
I was going to say,
my improv hobby has turned into an income stream for me because I am now a regular in the murder mystery dinner theater scene. And so I get paid to do improv and I get tips.
See,
I made $60 in tips the other night.
Okay.
Hey, you could get a tank of gas now? I'm not sure how much you take. I'm an ED person, but
I usually buy like 2/3 of a breakfast for my family.
Well, hey, look, this podcast, right? This has become my hobby for the last almost 7 years, and talk about expensive hobby. But yeah, I mean, I like the improv stuff because I love stand-up comedy and I love sort of that vibe and scene. I am not brave enough to get up there. I don't think I'm funny enough to be a stand-up comedian, or even an improv person. But Elizabeth, you mentioned trying to do this in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in. If you want to try something, and I told you, like, I'm the kind of person that you have to like drag me along and then I'll have a good time, but I won't go do it by myself.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Well, we're going to go to a show in Berlin And then if there's a jam, that's where
what? A jam?
an improv jam. That's where people from the audience can participate. You don't have to. I won't force you, but I think you should do a level 1 class at some point.
Okay. I have been on stage. I did tell a story of my restaurant days. And we're going to go along here by a couple minutes, but I did tell a story of my restaurant days, being a server at I would say, large U.S. national food chain, and a particular item that I served, and kind of told a story about that on stage in San Francisco at an RSA conference, I want to say a couple years ago, many years ago at this point. And so, it was interesting to get up there and to talk about it and kind of share the story. For me, it's a funny story, but you kind of have to be in the food service business to kind of get it to some degree. And so there's a lot of that sort of like inside humor that I tend to gravitate towards too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I bet there's
my improv experiences. I used to do a lot of crank calling when I was a kid.
All right. So what was your call? Like, is your refrigerator running? Like, what are we talking about here?
No, we would, it's like very random, but there was one that I think is a great story. So there was a pizza place in my college called Sugar Bowl. And when they would show up at the dorm hall, they would call you and say, Sugar Bowl in the lobby, and then they'd hang up on you. And so I called one of the guys who was in a room down the hall. Sugar Bowl in the lobby, hung up on him. Waited a few more minutes, call him back. I'm like, Sugar Bowl in the lobby. He's like, I didn't order Sugar Bowl. I hung up. Waited about a minute or two, and then I banged on his door. I said, Sugar Bowl. And he's like, I didn't order Sugar Bowl. And we're all standing there like cracking up. It was that kind of fun.
This reminds me of a scene from Super Troopers where the guy gets pulled over in the very beginning. He's pulled over. He can't pull over any further. He's pulled over.
So I feel like this would be a good. So there's the way that a lot of improv shows work is someone comes up and does a monologue, tells a story from their life like this one. And then that leads to people reenacting it and taking it in all sorts of different directions. And I feel like Sugar Bowl in the lobby could be incredible fodder.
Great fodder.
Now I know what Jim's password is. It's clearly Sugar Bowl in the lobby. And Jim's going to have to change his password.
Better rotate that password, man.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Elizabeth, we went long, but I'm fine with it. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. We laughed, we cried, we commiserated. I'm not sure what else we did. We
rambled. I rambled.
We pondered. Yeah, we rambled, all kinds of different stuff, but it was a fun conversation. Let's see what else. Plugs. Let's talk about your LinkedIn connection information being in our show notes so people can reach out to you with questions. Hopefully we'll have discount information for IDPro for new members joining in. If you're already a member, probably doesn't apply to you, but let's get the word out. Let's get some new members and get them a discount to join in on their first year. Find us on LinkedIn as well. Jim and I, we're always looking for comments and feedback on how things are going out there. And what else? Discount codes for the conferences are also on our homepage, idacupodcast.com. Like and subscribe. Post in the Slack channel for IDPro. And we'll leave it there for this week. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jim, change your password. And we'll leave it there for this week. Thanks everyone for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.